it's Dena Tollefson and welcome to my studio. I am so glad to have you here today. So today's topic is going to be how to set up a successful still life, and I've got a couple of objects here and a painting that I've done. So if today is your first time here, I want to say welcome and thank you for coming to my channel, and I hope that you'll hit the subscription bell and come back again to see me. And if you've been here before, thank you so much for joining, and I welcome you back to the studio. You can hear my little birds, Gershie and Romeo, back there, and they're pretty excited to have you here as well. So let's get started.
So here's an example of a still life setup that I did recently. This was for a painting called Lemon Love, a collaboration I did with fellow artist Erica Lancaster. On the left you can see the still life, and I have it set up in North Light, and on the easel you can see the painting that I was working on in oil. So still life you can do in oil, acrylic, colored pencil, watercolor, pastel, literally whatever you like. The important thing is to set up a pleasing arrangement of objects and to have the proper lighting. Use a mat board to peek through and see if the composition is going to be good from the angle you're looking at. Lighting.
It is very important that you use one light source, and if there's anything that is going to be confusing or make a still life look strange or wonky or not convincing, it's going to be bad lighting. So what you want to think about when you set up your objects is you want to think about having the light hit right at about 3/4 angle.
So here's an example of how to do this good lighting. You have the light coming in through the north, and it's putting this wonderful glow on the penguin, on his face and on his flipper. And if you can look and see his belly, you can see a reflected light coming back, bouncing off of the orange onto the penguin, and that would be a wonderful glow to include in your painting that you do. The light, you can see the light is on the oranges. If you kind of squint a little bit, you can see where the highlight is, and you can see where the shadows are.
You want that light to hit about halfway between straight on and then 90 degrees, so about a 45-degree angle. If you can get your light to hit about over here, then what will happen is that will set up some nice shadow areas. So this painting that I did here, and I actually used the same vase for this painting if you recognize it, and I also used an orange, but the orange that was here is long gone. So what I did was I set the orange, and the orange made some wonderful reflections because the way the light was hitting made some wonderful reflections here on the vase, here, and also it reflected up here as well. And a still life, in order to be convincing, you need to have an area of light and an area of shadow. So you can see on the orange this wonderful shadow effect that we have, and that is what helps make the orange look convincing or look round. So if I hold an orange here, you can see that there's going to be the area where the light hits it, and then you're going to see a darker area. Now if I don't have good lighting, and I'm just going to switch and change, I've got right now an artificial light, I'm going to switch and turn that off. So let me just reach across and turn that off, and you'll see we have a whole different kind of lighting scheme. So now we see this is only just, I have a really wonderful north light here, but you can see that we've got a change in what the lighting is. So when doing a still life, you can set up artificial light or you could use real light, but it's important to keep your light consistent. And so we like to use north light because it is going to be the light that's going to be not washing out the subject or being too bright, and it will also be consistent, so you could be painting or drawing really for hours and the light will stay consistent for you. So there's a thing in painting called chasing the light, and that's if you're painting outdoors in plein air and you're painting some objects and the light is hitting in a certain spot, and then like an hour later now it's hitting over here and then 2 hours later it's hitting over here. When you're working with a north light, then what can be really nice is that light will be really consistent. If you have just the artificial light, make sure to not move the light and have all the other areas in the room dark. Now I set up my light so the light, the artificial light, is aligned next to the window, so it's just going to add a supplemental light. So I'll turn that back on and you can see the difference again. Okay, so you can see that it gives a brighter look and a brighter light. So it just depends on what you like to work with. It's totally up to you. The different light will set up a different ambiance.
Artificial lighting. So you might wonder, what do I do if I don't have a wonderful north light, or if I live in the southern hemisphere, I don't have a wonderful southern window to set up my still life, and I have to maybe work in the darkness, or I maybe just don't have the right lighting. Well, what you can do is use artificial lighting. And so artificial lighting, if you isolate and make sure that the rest of the room is dark and just have one light, you can get some fantastic effects. And so the trick here then is to again position your light so it's at a 45-degree angle or a 3/4 degree angle, and then look to see that you have proper highlights and proper shadows. You can also use a little viewfinder like I've got here to kind of see if your composition looks good and if you can see those shadows. I'm liking that because I can see the shadow against the fabric from the penguin and the nautilus shell. I can see the shadow from the lemon on the table. And so that would be a good candidate for a lighting solution. But oftentimes a artificial light is going to be a little bit more harsh than natural light. If you're using, for example, just a soft north light, but that can also create some interesting effects, and depending on the mood you're trying to create with your still life, that can be a pleasing effect. So now I'm just setting up and moving some objects around. What I'm looking to get here is a layered effect. So a layered effect is another important aspect of setting up a still life. And when you set up a layered effect, what you're trying to do is get an overlap of the objects. So we have the vase and the penguin are in the back, and then we have the next layer is the oranges, and then the little tiny shell and the brush in the front, looking for a combination of different heights, different textures, and different directions that the objects are moving, so that they will look like they're all kind of relating and touching in some way, but yet they also look like individual little objects, and they'll create a depth of field.
Now I'm going to also show you, I've got a couple other still lifes that I did. Let me put those up on the easel. So here was one that I did. This is a acrylic painting of some lemons and a vase. And again, I was really kind of fascinated by the shapes of the reflections of the lemons in the vessel, in this glass vessel. And then again, we have these wonderful little shadows that were appearing from the light that was coming in. We have the highlight, and then we've got the shadow area. And I've got another one for you here. And then here, this painting, a couple of daisies, and then the same blue vase again. Here, this vase makes another appearance. And in this case, the light was hitting, you can see right where the light was hitting, and then the reflection of the daisies in the vase, and then a long shadow. And then here is a little watercolor that I just completed recently. And I was using this orchid. Let me grab my orchid here. So I was using this orchid, and it was painted in a north light. And what happens is these, when we're painting with the light, we can see all of the different colors that are showing up on the flower, and on the inflorescence and on these little buds.
Choosing a color scheme for drama. So when I was deciding how to set up the still life for the Lemon Love painting, I experimented. I knew I needed 2 lemons and a purple flower and a blue background. And so I played around a little bit with the mat board and the colors. I was trying to go for a lot of drama, and I was thinking of actually using that cobalt blue color. That's just a shirt that my husband has. I like to just try different colors out and then kind of see what looks the best. So I had a bunch of different colors of his shirts. I had a blue, this kind of cobalt blue that you saw earlier, and then I had a turquoise color that you see here, and then this kind of denim color, and wanted to see what was going to look the best. The denim color was going to be more grayed, but I really liked the vibrancy that that turquoise color gave. And even though it wasn't as dramatic as the dark blue, I felt like that turquoise was really going to add something. So just to be sure, I also compared against this kind of denim blue, or what it would look like to have a very, very dark background. And I thought that also looked dramatic, but it looked a little bit more harsh. And then also just went back and looked at this cobalt, which I also really love too. I think that one would have been a really successful painting. The contrast between the white of the tablecloth and then the lemons and the chrysanthemum would have really been a good combination. There you can see I'm kind of moving the objects. Now what's not good about that, with the way I just moved them, is that the lemons aren't touching anymore. And when the lemons aren't touching, then we feel like all the objects are not all one unified piece. So there, even with the flower moved a little bit, the arrangement looks more unified. So just moving the objects around a little bit to get a feel for how to make them look connected yet also have some depth of field is key. These little mat boards are super nice to just put in front, and you kind of, if you pick a mat board that has the same dimensions as your painting, it makes it very nice and easy to visualize what you're doing. Now, some people will photograph their work and then work from the photograph, and other people prefer to work directly from life. I'm one of those people where I like the immediacy of having the objects in front of me. I feel like it gives me a more dynamic painting, but then that's just me personally. You can also see here too that when you move the viewfinder just a little bit, a couple inches over one direction, it changes the look of the painting. So here it's a low horizon. The objects are way up close. It's there's not enough breathing space at the front of the painting. So I'm looking at that and I can see that I'm going to need to move that mat board further up so that we have more open area at the beginning or at the front of the painting or the foreground of the painting. So let's get that moved over a little. There we go. Now that gives enough breathing space between the foreground, the midground, and the background. And ideally you want to try and set up your still life so that your objects are all connected in some way, and set it up so that there's a definite foreground, midground, and background. Alright, so that's a winner. Alright. Now let's take a look and see, what if we just had 2 objects? Looking at different combinations, I'm trying the different colors of blue of my husband's shirts just to kind of see what color combination looks best. And look what happens if I all of a sudden change the colors out. So orange and blue are opposites on the color wheel. So when we pick things that are opposite, we can get a lot of drama. So let's look at some examples of still life setups and also some things that we might want to avoid. Here's an example of where we have all the objects lined up like little soldiers. And although the objects are attractive, they may not be as nice as they could be if we layered them a little bit. So let's go ahead and move the objects a little bit and let's see if that looks better. Yeah, you can see that just by using the layered effect, that we can create a much more dynamic depth of field. Here's another thing to kind of just avoid, is just everything all in a row. So here's another thing is here the objects aren't feeling like they're related to each other and they're just all kind of crammed in there. So here's a thing that we'd want to avoid, would be putting large objects in front of small ones and not having the objects all feel like they're connected in a way, either by color or by theme, something like that. We do want to have a variety of sizes and textures and colors, but trying to find something where there's some harmony with everything and a variety of sizes and heights and textures. It's almost a matter of playing with it, to be sure. The other thing is how far to hold or how close to move in when you're painting. If you want to paint in super close or paint far away, that's really kind of a matter of personal preference. I personally like to get right in on the subject, but not everybody does. This is another common thing that happens, is people might do a vase of flowers, but there's a way to make it a little bit more interesting than just having only the vase. And we've got a red background here. The red is looking a lot like the flowers. So we can improve this by going, instead of all in the red and purple family, try and have some more contrast between the subject and the background. Now, what if we were to just take and use white? We can get a lot of drama here through that contrast. So it just all depends what kind of a look you're going for. But as a general rule, the more drama you can introduce in your still life, the better off it is. So just playing a little bit with the colors and taking a look. But I'll show you, there's a little trick of, sometimes we will put only a vase, and it really kind of limits the depth of field of the still life. So look if we add just one object and and then maybe even added a group of objects. All of a sudden the composition changes and we have a variety of heights and textures, and look how much more interesting that still life becomes when we think of the flowers as just one object and then add other objects to it as well. Here we have a white background. That also looks very beautiful, I think. I think that would be a very successful still life. And we're also allowing the way the objects are set up so that the light coming through will hit all of the objects and we can get some nice shadows and reflections. But I feel like that look right there would be a very successful painting. Now, what if we added a flower in the front? We can increase our depth of field even more and connect all of the objects in a line by just putting one of the blossoms out in front. So again, it becomes a thing of personal preference. I feel like that combination, adding the little stone bear, works, but in my mind I prefer the look of that flower out on the table.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today and my little dog Muffin, and thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you again soon. So until next time, this is Dena Tollefson. Bye-bye.